This is a film about how the Holocaust has affected the lives of 4 people. Most textbooks just deal with facts and show pictures of Hitler and the death camps, but we wanted to make a film with individuals which showed their feelings and that they had families who were destroyed. The 4 survivors you will meet are Esther, Harry, Liesl and Werner. The other people in the film are 12 students from various schools on Tyneside. They got together a few times before meeting the survivors, but none of the questions were planned in advance.
I was born 68 years ago in a provincial town in Germany, and life was very normal before the Nazis came to power. I lived the life of an ordinary schoolboy, went to an ordinary school, and I grew up as an ordinary German youth. The change only occurred when I was 12 years of age. Now, in the year 1933, I found suddenly that my people and I were turned into vermin. From there onwards, after the Nazis came to power, our life went sharply downhill from economic oppression to humiliation. I was chased out of school when I was 14 years of age, and I went into a Jewish college. Just before my 16th birthday, our school was ransacked, destroyed in the so-called Kristallnacht, and I found myself in a concentration camp called Dachau. That was hell, but I survived, and it induced me to seek refuge in England. I came here 50 years ago, and I have had 50 years to think through the events of those days.
You know, how did you feel when the Nazis actually were in power?
Scared, worried, disturbed, because I couldn't understand what crime I had committed. I was a traitor, a polluter, what have you. I felt outraged above all, and frightened, because there was nothing I could do to resist.
Did your family become more united, more close?
Yes, indeed, because we were driven in upon ourselves. We lost our non-Jewish contacts, so therefore the community was driven into itself, the family united, because we knew we had to stay together because we were on the edge of being broken up, which happened in due course.
And did you have any un-Jewish friends? And what was their reaction to it?
Well, obviously we had Jewish friends. We had no others, because non-Jewish Aryan boys and girls couldn't afford the luxury of being called Jew lovers. So our company became more and more Jewish, and we all felt the same. Above all, we all were worried about one thing: where shall we go?
Liesl, what we'd like to know is what you remember of your experiences before and during the Holocaust.
I was born in Czechoslovakia in a family. I was very well looked after and loved, and I had a brother, and life was good. And then the part where I lived was the Sudetenland, so that's the part the Germans occupied first, and we fled inland to Prague. And then the Germans occupied the whole of my country. And at that time, everyone was busy, all the Jewish people there were busy trying to get visas to get out. But my parents weren't able to do that. But there was a scheme available to allow children out under the age of 16. So I was able to get out in the last train that left Prague before the beginning of the war. Not my brother, he was too old. He was over 16. So I came to England, and my parents said, "See you soon." And the bit in England, the bit during the war wasn't too bad. It was like being homesick and just marking time and waiting for the war to be over and go home again. And the real horror was when the war was over and I discovered that everybody I grew up with was dead. I did find my mother, and I'm saying I did find my mother because she was very changed. She wasn't the mother I had left. And also, I remember our first meeting where she, who had lost her husband and her son and her parents and all her peers, was saying to me, "You're the only one left to me to make life okay for me." And that was a colossal burden I couldn't manage. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I knew it's something I could never do. So our relationship was very different when we met again. I left age 12 and we met again when I was 19.
Well, I was born in Poland, in Łódź, which was the second largest city in Poland, and a third of the total population was Jewish. So I grew up with a strong awareness of being Jewish. Very much aware, though, of the hostile environment, because I don't generalize, but one felt Poles were very anti-Semitic. But I had a very happy home life, and if you're a child and you're loved by your parents, you feel very secure. The main event, of course, I remember vividly the outbreak of war, and my town was invaded just a week after. And of course we were terrorized from the very beginning, the whole population, but the Jews in particular. So I do know that I was very scared, very frightened, at one point feeling a kind of childish excitement that it's going to be over soon and won't there be a lot to talk about. The first very painful thing was for us as a family. My father had to flee our hometown, so the last time I've seen him was at the age of 11. 1940, when we were all herded in to the ghetto, and in a small section of the poorest town, the poorest part of the city, and we were something like 230,000 in that place, hermetically, barbed off, and there was no way of escape. But I would say the most painful moments were the mass deportations, which started taking place in 41 and 42, where most of my friends were just disappearing. Most of them died of starvation and hunger. And then, of course, it was the journey to Auschwitz when the ghetto was liquidated, the train journey, and separation from my mother. And of course, although we had been under Nazi occupation for so long and suffered all the degradation, hunger, disease, we were not prepared for what Auschwitz was. And of course, this is the most painful moment, which I have never got over. But there were light moments in my life, as a child. Life was very interesting, and my parents were mixed up in a sort of kind of movement that was going to shape a new world, and I grew up with a strong sense of love for everybody, despite the fact that we were not being loved.
I was wondering about when you were going to Auschwitz on the journey, whether you actually knew the situation that you were going into, or whether you had been told that you were just going off on a holiday? Or
No, no one was told that was going off on a holiday. We were told that we were being, you know, sent to another place, Übersiedlung, you know, another place of work, and we were told to take things with us, like various utensils and so on. So no, we were not aware, but we didn't expect anything good, because all the people who have been deported before were never heard of again. Dreadful things were happening in the Lodz ghetto after 1942, when clothing started arriving back into the Lodz ghetto, marked, you know, names, and people who worked in various factories, like making carpets for the Germans from old rags, found their relatives' clothing. So that left you wondering what could have actually been happening. So no, we didn't expect anything good, but certainly didn't expect what was coming, not at all. And when we did arrive, the people who worked there at the railways, they said, you know, form and fives to me, they said, say you're older. And we said, where are we? Where are we? Where are we? You mean you don't know what this is? I said, no, we don't. And I had seen the barbed wire, and I had seen people that just looked very deranged, and we thought, well, that's not for us, because that looks like some kind of lunatic asylum, so that's not for us. And then I just, from a distance, saw someone go towards the wire and fall. And I was told, well, you know, she's touched the electrified wire. She's dead now. It still did not somehow sink in. They even gave us on arrival a tin of something, you know, to eat, while we were actually being pushed towards selection. So everything was done in such a way that you couldn't think at all. You couldn't think at all. You were just pushed. And that was the reality. So never, I know now that one could possibly never imagine it not having it experienced.
My name is Chaim Nagelsztajn. I lived in a town called Rubieszów in Poland. And when the Germans come in, like in our town, they stopped us going to school and different things. And we lived there quite happily for when they come about 2 years. Then after about 2 years, they started getting deportation in groups of Jewish people. It's about 10,000 Jewish people lived in that town where we lived. And so they started deportation. We were about three parts every so often, every 2 or 3 weeks. And then and we were the last ones, like. So my mother and father and my brothers had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, mother and father, nine of us now. Went into hiding. They hid themselves in the cellar in the house. So my sister and I and a boyfriend, we didn't want to go down the cellar, so somebody had to be upstairs in any case to cover the lid over what was in the cellar. And we put the lid down and put a bed over it, so nobody could see where this entrance to the cellar is. So and then we run away to a farmer, and we hid ourselves in a haystack. The haystack was specially hollowed out inside with timber, so we could live there. There was 10 of us living with my sister's boyfriend's mother and father and their children stayed there. And we stayed there for 2 weeks. They decided they've had enough in that haystack, and they went out to another village. They went, and it was just the 3 of us left, my sister, myself, and a boyfriend. And so the fireman used to come each evening and putting food down and milk beside the haystack, and we used to come out and get it. We couldn't go out for a day, so even in the evenings, if I wanted to go out to use the toilet, we'd have to all be in the evening to come out to the haystack to use the toilets outside. So then we gave ourselves up, because there was only the three of us. Then the farmer come and said he saw some young people in the town doing work and walking down in the houses, clearing all the houses out, the Jewish houses. So I come and my sister and boyfriend, we gave ourselves up to the Gestapo, and we said, they asked us where we were. We said we were just hiding in the woods. Is there any chance can we work here or something? They said okay, so they put us in this Jewish ghetto. There's about 250 people were. And we cleared all the Jewish belongings out from all the houses, Jewish houses. And that was after about 3 months. And then after 3 months, the Gestapo surrounded over that little ghetto with about 250 people, and it took half of us away. My sister was in the other half still staying, and I was taken away to a place, concentration called Majdanek. That was my first concentration camp, Majdanek. And after about 4 or 5 weeks there, the assessors were coming around and asking if anybody's builders or joiners. They need about 80 people to go out to work somewhere. So my father in Poland was a builder, and I was only young, because when I went into concentration, I gave me 3 years older. I was actually 14, but I gave him 3 years. So if you're a bit older, they put you to work. So so I put my hand up saying that I'm a Maurer, my father was a builder and all this sort of thing. And they said, oh yes, and they said, how much bricks can they this now? I said, oh. So he said, oh, you're a builder, so right, you go on here. And we went out and we worked in a place called Zamość. We built a factory, or pickled onions, cucumbers, cabbage, all this sort of thing. We built this factory. And we were there about 6 or 7 months, and then once the factory was finished, well, Majdanek concentration camps was liquidated. They killed everybody in that camp. They burned and gassed the whole camp. They didn't bring any more prisoners to that camp. They just liquidated the whole concentration camp. So we belonged to Majdanek because we were just hired out to this working camp. So there was an order come to the town where we were working that they've got to finish us, not to bring us back to Majdanek because there's no more Majdanek, so they've got to kill us, the 80 people, the 80 workers. So there was one Gestapo, they said, such a good workers, they're going to kill, they built this factory, wonderful job they made. So there was a place out not far from where we built an airfield, and there was about 1,200 Jewish people working there. So that we didn't know where we were going. We got two trucks, put us in 2 trucks, went down to this airfield, and they exchanged for 80 people from there. They let us go to work in that airfield, and they took 80 people away to a Jewish cemetery, and they shot them, and then they could turn around and say to Majdanek, where the concentration camp, that they killed us.
When Hitler came to power in 1933, what were your immediate reactions to it?
Well, remember, I was 12 years of age, so my immediate reactions were little bit immature. But let me say this, my father thought it was a very good show, because Hitler, after all, was a empty-brained, loud-mouthed demagogue, and it was about time for Hitler to be given the responsibility so that he would be shown up to be what he was, that he could not solve Germany's problems. But then my father was not a political either. He was proved wrong. My reactions were very worried, we didn't like it, but the main thing also occurs, we always had that optimism. It can't last. The French, the British, the Americans, the League of Nations, anybody, somebody will come to our rescue. I don't know, but they didn't.
Yeah, when Hitler was voted into Parliament, did you think, could you have thought that he could have done what he did?
No, And the whole thing is, this is something that we have to consider. Hitler wrote a piece of political garbage called Mein Kampf. It was economic and political nonsense, and everybody knew it to be so. And having said that, he kept his promise.
Could you go into more detail on why your father had to leave?
Yes, my father had to leave because he was an active member of a Jewish socialist organization, which was very, very strong in Poland. The name of the organization was Bund, and he was very active, and his name appeared in lots of papers, town hall and so on. My uncle, who was a correspondent for a socialist newspaper, was arrested within 3 weeks of the Germans entering town, and my father was simply advised to leave for his safety. And we were going to follow, and we actually attempted to follow, but we had to return at that time. The Germans were all over. We tried, obviously, to flee, but as non-Jews, and people were returning and saying, you know, they're taking everyone, you just can't make it. So we didn't.
What did you actually believe was happening to your parents and your family when you were in England? Have any idea?
I hadn't a clue. I had letters for a little while via the Red Cross through Portugal, I think, and then everything stopped. And I didn't know. I just assumed they were having some sort of bad time, and I'd see them when the war ended. I assumed throughout the war they were okay. And it was just a time of separation that I had to weather out, and they had to weather out. I didn't know. We didn't know. It now turns out Churchill knew very well what was going on during the war, but not I. It took me a long time to face all that period emotionally, and when I did, the first feeling I had was a kind of a betrayal. I'd got sent away and they said, see you soon. Especially with my father. I was the sort of daddy's girl. See you soon. Some sort of betrayal that he goes and gets himself killed.
Well, this is just a memory of 1942 in the Lodz ghetto. I remember it very vividly. So it's just summer of 42, late summer 1942, the darkest period to date in the Lodz ghetto, renamed by the Germans Litzmannstadt. So many painful memories abound, faces and images of my dearest ones so cruelly struck down in the prime of their lives, appear and demand not to be forgotten. As if I ever could or would, always and forever, they are in the very depth of my whole being. To quote a line from a Yiddish poet, I have not yet returned from the longest funeral procession, and so I am forever attending silent memorial services. Summer 1942. I see my mother's face full of anguish and sorrow, and yet I can still discern a loving smile in her sad eyes. And I, the once, not so long ago, happy and mischievous girl, now so timid and frightened, and so old at 14, with the pain and burden of my generation. Thousands of people were dying of starvation. Mass deportations, which had been taking place since the beginning of the year, had reached their zenith at the end of that summer. One day in September, the Germans arrived in trucks and deported all the patients from the 2 or 3 hospitals still functioning in the ghetto. My mother, who had been confined in one of them, managed to escape with a few others by some miraculous means. 2 or 3 days later, a strict curfew was enforced and no one was allowed to leave home for 10 days. The Germans, accompanied by Jewish policemen, were going from house to house, rounding up all the inhabitants. then selection would begin. All the old, sick, infirm, and the very young were dragged or thrown onto the trucks and taken away, never to be heard of again. Although the vast majority of us were as yet unaware of the existence of Auschwitz, Belsen, and Treblinka, we knew instinctively, after 3 years under Nazi rule, that all those taken away were doomed. My brother, who was 18, and myself might have stood the chance of not being taken, but there was no hope whatever for Mother because of her outward appearance. Although only 42, she looked old and very ill at the time. Her hair had been shaven at the hospital, and her face and body were swollen from malnutrition. To avoid selection, we embarked on a plan to cheat our tormentors. As one courtyard led to another, and we knew all the secret paths and passages, we would run from place to place, hiding in the houses that had already undergone selection, until it caught up with us very early one morning. The SS arrived in trucks in front of our block of flats and immediately posted guards in every part of the courtyard. We were quite convinced that the end had come. We lived on the last floor of the building, and there was a big loft above. Access to it was through a flap door reached by a ladder. All of us, that is, all the neighbors on that floor, decided in a flash to climb up the ladder and hide in the loft. We left the flap door open in the hope that it would make it less obvious that anyone was up there. One young couple, whose gorgeous little girl of 3 was asleep in their flat in a wicker basket, thought it safer to leave her there rather than risk her cries if awoken. They piled lots of bedding and clothes on the basket, and in fear of and deranged state of mind, they hoped that the flat would not be thoroughly searched. In that silence, we huddled together. We heard them go up from floor to floor and heard the screams of people as they were brutally beaten up and dragged out of their rooms. They were our neighbors, and we knew them all. Most of them were too ill to leave their beds. They reached the last floor, and we heard the SS men ordering the Jewish policemen to search each room. We held our breaths, praying for little Danusha, asleep in the wicker basket. Alas, in vain, for we heard a big thump, something being kicked over, and Danusha's cry, "Mummy, Mummy." Can any normal person comprehend what it was like being up there in the loft with Danusha's parents? Or can anyone comprehend what it is like to live with those memories and go on living? I doubt it. After they had searched all the rooms, we heard the SS order one Jewish policeman to climb up the ladder and search the loft. We were all convinced our time was up. I was pressing closely to my mother, and I remember vividly, and oh, how I wish my cursed memory did not serve me so well. I remember bidding silently goodbye to my mother, my brother, my young life, and all that was dear to me. The policeman climbed up, looked around, saw us, and we heard him say on climbing down, "No one is up there." It was a chance in a million that his words would be taken. But he took that chance, risking his life. It is probable that, thanks to his display of great courage, which was not an isolated case, I am alive today and not fully shattered in my belief in mankind. It also afforded me the great fortune of being together with my mother for 2 more years and getting to know her better. She was a wonderful person who, until the last days of her life, which so cruelly ended in the Auschwitz crematoria, she nurtured me with her love and urged me to go on, instilling in me hope for the future. The policeman's name was Jakubowicz. He survived the war, but his wife and young daughter did not. So this was not the only act of courage that I have witnessed. And it has helped all along. And I make sure that I always remember it. And even as I pointed out before, the little apple from a German SS. It's only an apple, but he risked a lot. Sometimes he would say, "No one is looking, sit down." And he was the only one, really, because in that camp they were displaying a lot of cruelty without being ordered to do so. That was hard to swallow. I still have got difficulty to come to terms with it now. Like, I have got difficulty to come to terms and think of those engaged in Auschwitz or Treblinka or elsewhere during the day in the crematoria in cruelty. And they were fathers and sons, and they must have set out in the evening and wrote loving letters to their wives, or maybe inquired how their children were doing at school. I find it very difficult to come to terms with, but I know that the two coexist, and it is this that we have to fight, because if evil is let loose, this is the proportion it can take, so we have to do something to nurture and try and see what good there is. And of course, the hope is in young people not to be indifferent bystanders.
Did you have any non-Jewish friends during that time?
Oh, of course we had non-Jewish friends at the beginning. And I think the one that comes to mind is my friend Willy. We were pals from the word go. We shared our childhood, and we were really as close as can be. Willy's parents were staunch Catholics, anti-Nazis, and they protected Willy from becoming infected with the Nazi ideology to the extent that they put him into a boarding school. We met for the last time just before I emigrated. By that time, Willy could not afford to speak to me in public, just a mumbled goodbye, good luck, and hope we'll see each other again. And that I would have thought would have been the end of the story. The payoff came after the war. Willy had been taken prisoner of war by the Russians, and the Russians did not treat the German prisoners too gently. Willy was very badly knocked about, and he said, "Serves me right for volunteering for the army." I said, "For goodness' sake, Willy, you mean you volunteered after all that?" "Oh yes," said he. "You see, 1940, the Wehrmacht had trampled over Poland, Scandinavia, Belgium and France. That was the hour of fate for the German people. I volunteered, paid the price for it."
Before the war, did you have any Polish friends?
Yes, not many, but I certainly did. I lived in a block of flats which wasn't exclusively Jewish, and there was one friend I liked very much, Halina. They even used to invite me in for the Christmas, you know. But she was nice, her brother was very nice, her mother was nice, but the father was a vicious anti-Semite, not towards my family, but he really was. I had actually seen him once taking part in an anti-Semitic, fascist rally it was. I used to come home and cry to my parents, "How is it possible?" And they said, "Well, it is, but remember, they are sick people. You must not look at it any other way. We have to be strong, but they are sick, not us."
I never thought I'll ever survive the concentration camp. I was walking around in the concentration camp, or we're going out working, we're looking down to see if we can find something to eat or whatever. And we always worked, we never we lived just from day to day, like, we never thought ever I'll ever go out and sit here and talk to you or something like that, never thought of it, no.
Was that the view of most people?
Yes, most people did, oh yes. Nobody walked head high up in the concentration camps, always head down, and you never thought that you were going to survive the concentration camps, never.
What did you feel when you did actually realise you'd survived these concentration camps?
I was quite happy, but the other thing I was worried about my family. I was more concerned about my family. I know all my family died, and one sister, I didn't know she was alive or dead. But myself, I was pleased. I survived. At least one survivor out of my family, 9 of us. I was very pleased with it. Yes, definitely. Oh yes.
And was that a German thing? Call you by the names? Call you by numbers?
By numbers, yes, all by no names. Nobody had a name in the concentration camps. No, it's just number. Mm-hmm.
Talking about that, it felt like with everybody looking the same and having like that achieved, people felt like they'd lost that individuality. Is that right? Is that how people felt?
Yes, definitely. Oh yes, yes. Yeah. I've got a number here with my hand.
You can show
oh,
it.
shit. I'm shaking with it. That the A stands for Auschwitz, and that's 198779.
Even when you look at that still, is it not?
Yes, many times I look at it and think I could have had it taken off or something, but it's just nothing to be taken off. It's there. They put it down put it there, and now I'm just going to wear it till I die.
We'd just like to look at how you felt today when you came to talk to us. And I think, although you seem to have come to terms with what actually happened to you, we still feel that it must have been really hard for you to come and talk to us today.
Mm-hmm. I think it's been a long journey to explore the dark side, the painful side. That was and that was only in 1979, not very long ago, that I started to cry and to grieve and to rage. And that was sort of my liberation, setting myself free from the energy I used suppressing all that material. I now let it out, and that energy is now available to me for other activities, for other issues. And that was the kind of watershed. And in the wake of that, I began to realize how that journey of mine on that train affected me since. For example, in my relationships with men. I was, you probably know your parents are your first models of a man and a woman. So my father, who I was his little girl, I was a daddy's girl. He loved me very much. So for me, the formula of love was something about, love is you really trust someone, get very, very close, and then they send you away, and you never see them again. And I think I made sure not to put myself through that again. And in the choice of relationships I had, I actually made sure I had people that where there was a distance, where I didn't get what I truly wanted, which was closeness again, because of the fear of being abandoned, being sent away. What I did have a lot for a long, long time after the war was feeling guilty that I was alive when the others hadn't survived. And it's been really a slog, somehow releasing myself from that guilt. It does no good. It doesn't bring anyone back to life, just me being around feeling guilty. Rather that I'm a sort of a banner bearer for my family. I'm here, and I want to be here to my fullest, do them honour, do me honour at the same time. What am I doing? I'm moved. I'm not crying. I just feel moved to be saying that. It feels better. Yep.
Did it not relieve the guilt when you found your mother? Or at least
The guilt was that I was in England and she was in the camps. I had got off lightly, I imagined, and they'd all had a much worse time, including her.
Mm.
And meeting her again compounded that for me. That's right. The paradox of having been the one to get away, somehow I felt badly about having done that. That's right. Rather than being with them.
Did that make it harder for you to care for your mother then? Or easier?
Listen, there was just no precedent how to be with a mother who'd survived Auschwitz. I just didn't know how to do that. And to be the only one of the whole family to do that for her. And at that time, I was a young woman, I was 19. I felt guilty a lot of the time with my mother. If ever she was upset, I was distraught somehow. It was my fault. I couldn't get it right. I was very torn.
So you feel that you didn't understand what made her change then?
I think I understood very well. But it was no man's land. We didn't talk about it. There were a lot of things we never talked about. How it was for me, how it was for her. It was unspeakable stuff. And I guess I couldn't have spoken about it either till recently.
Did you ever find your sister?
Yes, well, 1982, like, while I was in the concentration camps, that's how I was just telling everybody, that I did not believe there was a God in this world, like, because seeing what I saw with my own eyes, what they've done to little children, you know, smash their head in the stones, instead of, in Germany was saying, it's a shame to waste a bullet, or just smash their heads and all that sort of thing. So, so I didn't believe there was a God in the world, but I believe now because I found a sister after 39 years. She didn't know I survived, and I didn't know that she survived. When I come here to England in 1946, I knew I had a cousin in Palestine. It was Palestine, then it's Israel now. And I wrote a letter to him saying if he heard anything about my sister. I knew all my family was dead, but I did not know that was the sister, but they split us up. And she was the only one, I didn't know that she was dead. So I wrote that letter to him, and then about 8 years ago, my sister went to Israel, and she looked that cousin up to his house, and when they said, you know, Toivia, I'm the only survivor out of 9 of us. And he said, you're the only survivor? I said, I had a letter from Chaim in 1946, in England, near Scotland or somewhere. So my sister just collapsed down, like, and within a week they were here in Newcastle. I don't know if you saw the video. But she arrived in Newcastle airport, and was all of the photographers, everybody was there and rejoicing them. So they were the last one to come out of the plane, and she held a photo, a newspaper with my photo, and that she knew who I was. But I would never recognize them.
What about your feelings when you
When I found it, I was relieved. Like, as I said before, like, I couldn't believe, I believed there was no God in the world when I was in concentration, what I've seen, what they've done to little children and all that. But when I found my sister, I started believing in God again. I started going to synagogue again, and it's a complete different life I've got now since I found my sister.
Are you close again? Because
oh yes, very close. I've been about 6 times to America to see her, and she's been over here 3 times, so yes.
Did your basic faith and belief in God, did that help you through that time?
I don't know whether my basic faith and belief in God helped me. I think what helped me was the upbringing I had. And the upbringing was of was rather humanitarian, and despite everything, a strong belief and sense that there is some goodness, and even if there are evil forces about, you know, they were going to be conquered. This is that we wanted to believe and did everything. And I really think that this upbringing and the love I experienced, not just in the close family circle, but it was extended into my particular school and the environment of my parents, that helped me. So that was the feeling that helped me all along. And I did have my greatest prayer when I was liberated in Belsen. And outside the window, I was in an isolation ward. I did not remember the day of liberation, but when I came to, of course, people were going mad. The Germans were put to the task of clearing the corpses, which was just outside. And there was murder in everybody's hearts, and probably there was some murder in my heart too, because until then I didn't want to believe, despite the fact that I knew where my mother did go. I had to keep on believing that somehow it wasn't true. So there was something, I recognized it. So I prayed with all my might, I don't know to whom, probably just to myself. Please let me not be damaged for the whole of my life. Let me retain some love for people. Otherwise, the whole thing, the survival, the wanting to survive, wouldn't have been worth it.
Werner, when you go back to Germany these days, I think you must have some feelings of fear or anticipation or worry. Are those feelings true when you go back to Germany?
No, I wouldn't say fear. I think that's the wrong word. What have I got to be afraid of? When I go to Germany, it is equivalent to my visiting a cemetery. I go there to show respect, to look at places which have long since gone into history. What I do feel is a sense of estrangement. Let me explain. My own contemporaries, we meet and we talk and we say all the meaningless things. How are you? Have you any family? What are you doing? And we are all the time avoiding coming to grips with it, the reality. Where were you? What were you doing? My greatest pleasure in going to Germany is to talk to people of your age, and I do so often, who are trying to understand what they cannot come to grips with, their own history.
What about, how has it changed your views now? Does it make you more angry?
Bitter about the German? Oh yes, I think definitely it's this sort of thing, the Holocaust or killing people, murders, mass murder should never happen again, you know. It's all up to you, young people, to see that this never happens again, like, you know, oh yes.
I'm just wondering how you feel about the prospect of German reunification.
Yeah.
A lot about
the
that.
selfish bit of me says, I'm old, I won't see the outcome. I'm out of this one. I don't want to know. And another bit of me says, is shit scared of what might happen again, knowing full well that there are fascist movements and Nazi movements on both sides of the dismantled wall. I'm in terror of a unified Germany. I dare say they have the capacity and the character to have an action replay. Goddess forbid.
Werner's been back to Germany since war, have you?
I have not been back to Germany. I have only been in the concentration camp in Germany, and I would find it very hard to go to Germany. I somehow maybe, I don't know, maybe even a little afraid. I don't hate en masse. I can't do it because it was done to me, and I know that it is a very destructive force. But I feel very uneasy to meet any German who is just 5 years older than myself, because he probably was a member of the Hitler Youth. Young Germans, I have hope, because without hope, what else? I am scared, like Liesl, about the reunification of Germany. I'm just scared in the light of all the experiences.
Has the Holocaust, affected your views about racism today in Britain?
Of course it has. I mean, it has affected my views about everything. To me, there are many filthy four-letter words, but none filthier than the word race. The fact that we are sitting together at this very moment, and manifestly your own complexion labels you as somebody from a different background, that, of course, anybody who attacks you for being what you are in color or religion is attacking me, and I am going to go on fighting prejudice, discrimination and hatred in Britain as long as I have energy to do so. Anybody who uses the word "the," in my view, is a villain. What I mean by it is this. If anybody says "the Jews," "the Catholics," call any collective noun you like, the trade unionists, the gays, whatever it is, he is going down Hitler Street. You are who you are, not because of your race, because of your religion, but because you are you. Right, and now I want to try the experiment. Could I make you into a sadist? Do you think I could corrupt you to become a concentration camp guard? You're a nice guy, are you?
Yeah.
Would you murder Jonathan for me, please?
No.
If I promise you great wealth,
Not
you can
for
ask
any
your
amount of
price.
money.
You can have all the medals you like,
No.
and the honors. No. You mean you can't do it?
No.
When's the
I
last
wouldn't
time?
do it.
When's the last time you've killed?
Never.
Oh yes, you have. Do you remember using an aerosol to get rid of some insects, some vermin? Do you remember putting your foot on a cockroach? Right. Okay, now watch it. I've got some magic glasses here. Put them on. And now look over there. That is not a person. That is vermin. Do you still feel badly about ridding the earth of filthy, rotten, dirty vermin? I think you should. It would be a good thing for you to do.
Yeah.
Get my message. In other words, that is the sin of Nazi Germany. Not even the killing, but the dehumanization, making people into vermin. Once you've created the idea of vermin, then you've made the conditions for some people to react as some Germans did.
All the survivors here are Jewish. Did you think it was just a Jewish tragedy?
No, I knew gypsies, like you said.
Yes, it's very important to keep it.
Disabled people were killed, homosexuals. But it mainly, in schools, it mainly concentrates on the Jews.
It does, mainly.
If I'd been around there, because I'm handicapped myself, I don't know, if I'd been around in Germany at that time, it was bye-bye me. Not around anymore, gone. It was every section of the community at that time who didn't agree with Hitler's views. If you went out of his views, out of his line, it was everybody in danger.
I think it's important that people need to stand by everybody.
I think I've learned that 50 years on, there isn't such a thing as saying that, oh, it's in the past. We must forget about it and get on with our lives. You cannot forget about it. The pain still lives on of the Holocaust.
Something I have not been able maybe to do before, I would, for the sake of imparting my experiences to some positive effect, I would be willing to do it again. And I didn't think before I came that I would.
Today has like been an education for me in the aspect that some people could say racism is a modern problem, but we've seen
racism's been around like practically forever, you know, and we saw the eradication of Hitler's reign and his death camps, but I don't think we'll ever see the eradication of racism.
I feel greatly heartened by this day, indeed. You see, the four of us who talked to you, we are all growing older and understandably a bit tired. We haven't all that far to reach. And I apologize to you, the younger generation. We have burdened you with some nasty memories and also with the history of a most imperfect world which we are handing on to you and your children's children.
I don't feel I've burdened you. My hope is that I've given you a gift which you can transpose and transform in your own ways into standing up and opposing prejudice. And so I feel really hopeful that we've done something really constructive here. It's not enough for me to talk to my generation. It's not enough for me to talk to Jewish people. You are the future, and you have to hear. And I think in a microcosmic way, we've done that today.
I wouldn't be here today if the war hadn't been won at the time it was. My mother wouldn't be here, my grandparents wouldn't be here, and somehow I feel that I've had a connection with what went on in the Holocaust all through my life, though I've never been able to pick it up and look at it and say, look at this, wasn't it awful? And I think everybody here, especially you four people, have helped me to do that. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop fighting against what happened, and I will never, ever let it happen again.